Singapore's Internal Security Department says the threat of terrorism to the nation has risen since Hamas' 7th of October attack on Israel. Still, in an annual report, ISD says there is no indication of an imminent attack on Singapore. Anti-Singapore sentiments on social media have risen among regional netizens who perceive the country to be pro-Israel. Extremists are also targeting Singapore for taking part in safeguarding the Red Sea. Now, there have been posts calling for the country to be, quote, destroyed or wiped out. For threats coming from within Singapore, ISD says self-radicalization continues to be the main problem. 40 Singaporeans have been issued Internal Security Act orders since 2015, and that's compared to 12 foreigners. Now, some recent cases were triggered by the Israel-Hamas conflict, calling for violence in Singapore. Another ideology of growing concern is far-right extremism, with a Chinese boy identifying as a white supremacist. And one analyst says extremist ideologies can attract anyone, even older people.
They are looking for big causes. They are looking for something to fight for. And, one thing the white supremacist groups or far-right groups do, the threat groups do very well, is to promote this idea of a big cause to fight for, a sense of belonging and identity.
Turning to threats from the rest of the world, ISD says Islamist terrorism persists. For one, ISIS has already claimed several deadly attacks that killed hundreds this year, and the ISIS core could shift to Africa. Now, countries in the region have been targets of Islamist terror attacks in the past year. Indonesia has foiled several plots against the authorities. In the Philippines, a bomb went off in a university late last year, killing 4 and injuring 50. And closest to home, a lone wolf attacked a police station in Johor Bahru in May, killing 2 officers and injuring another. How prepared is Singapore for such attacks? In a survey up till June last year, less than half of respondents believed the country is a target. 2 in 3 kept an eye out for suspicious behaviors or items in public places, and more than 9 in 10 would help others. Dr. Kumar adds that travellers should stay alert but not alarmed.
Pay attention to public announcements from the authorities. Pay attention to what the foreign ministry, relevant foreign ministry announcements are regarding the travel advice. And when they're on the ground, be wary in crowded places.
Let's get more on this story from Jasminder Singh, Associate Research Fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. Mr. Singh, thank you very much for joining us today. Yes. So, as we heard in the story, less than half of respondents of a survey did last year believed that Singapore is a target. Less than half of respondents. Would you say that Singaporeans have, gotten complacent about the terror threat over the past years?
I think we won't say that they are complacent. They are rather very much updated. So, if you look at the annual threat assessment report has been released for the past few years. So, the Singaporeans actually are in the know. And they are rather also, they are vigilant of the current situation. So, they actually do have a sense of alertness when they travel. Even within the country, we have seen how there have been cases of suspicious characters being reported. And even now, we see family members reporting their own kin for anything related to terrorist-related matters. So I think we will say that Singaporeans are updated and they know actually what the threat is. So it might not be showing within this survey, but I think I would say that they are an updated population that we have here.
And the ISD report that just came out says that there is no indication of an imminent attack. But why must Singapore remain on high alert for terrorism threats?
When we look around in our neighborhood, and as you have mentioned earlier, Malaysia, Johor Bahru, just half an hour away, we had an attack in May. So in lieu of that, and Singaporeans do travel to JB all the time over the weekend. So these are all favorite spots for Singaporeans. So we need to be aware of the situation and where there are terror attacks in the region so that we do not get caught in an awkward situation. And when the need arises, we need to be able to know what to do next.
When it comes to terrorism financing, what risks does that pose to Singaporeans?
in the case of Singapore, I think we need to be very vigilant when donating to foreign entities. There are official channels. For example, we have the Singapore Red Cross. But we also need to take note that in Singapore, we do have the migrant worker community, for example. And there have been actually much been done to ensure that they do not donate to the wrong channel. So, the Ministry of Manpower has its own advisories, and community-based groups such as the Religious Rehabilitation Group, the RRG, has also put in efforts to actually work together with MOM and the Ministry of Home Affairs to ensure that the migrant workers do know where to donate and how to donate should there a need arise, because it involves international entities in this case.
Sure. Mr. Singh, self-radicalization is a primary threat driver, but an ideology that is of growing concern right now is far-right extremism. How do we tackle this phenomenon that non-white people in Singapore are being convinced by white supremacist ideology?
I think we need to understand that white supremacist ideology has got many broad ideas that, it's just not involving white people. So we should look beyond ethnicity.
Okay.
Majority of those, when we look even in the Singapore case, it involves youth. So, it's youth, for example, they get recruited through gaming channels. And even, so there is a connectivity, the ideas that work across this group. So, and when we look, white supremacy is just a name, but when it comes over to our part of the world, it's beyond whites anymore. So, it's youth. So we need to actually put in some resources to tackle this problem to ensure that we are able to solve it and nip it in the bud when it starts to build up. So, at the moment it's building up. We have one or couple of cases, but we need to actually stem it further to come out that it does not become a big problem that we are looking in, for example, in the case of Islamist terrorism. We don't want that to come to that stage.
Why specifically these youths? Why are they so influenced by this?
Nowadays we have to understand technology, connectivity. Everything is happening online.
Right.
So, for example, during COVID, everybody spent their time at home, online, playing games, chatting. So, you build the sharing of ideas. And then this whole thing, for example, in white supremacists, they do talk about things such as being anti-Arab sentiments, anti-LGBTQ matters as well. So, you build that there, you have a community that shares your ideas, which you might not be able to express it in public here in Singapore. So, rather than being public, you do it online and then you connect. So, it could be these individuals from this Singapore traveling to another part of the world to connect with these individuals and then bringing back those ideas back.
And there is an uptick of anti-Singapore rhetoric as well online that we are hearing of. What are they calling for, and how do we counter misinformation and perhaps, communicate nuance? I
think when it comes to misinformation, it's the public, us as Singaporeans, we need to actually verify what is the right information. Nowadays, we have AI manipulation, deep fakes. And as Singaporeans, it is our duty to ensure that what we read and what is the information flow, we cannot be assuming that everything that is told to us is true. And this whole anti-Singapore rhetoric, at the end of the day, in Singapore, it might be safe, but the build-up would be once we leave the borders of Singapore. So we need to actually be vigilant and understand, and it's also not to partake in all these conversations that are going online, because as I said earlier, many of these usually tend to fall within the fake news area.
And authorities, they have said that they are not always able to neutralize plots before they are actualized. What are the gaps that Singapore might be facing, and what is it doing to stay ahead, of the changing strategies or changing landscape of the terror threats?
I think the thing that has biggest change in we're looking at the terror environment today is technology. So the terrorists have their own online spaces. So they are chattering online and involves encrypted platforms. Previously it was Facebook. So that was open source, we could see it. But once the terrorists have learned. So, as nation, Singapore, and even the authorities, we always have to be vigilant all the time, because it's just one instance that the terrorists get in and we actually, you lose that whole piece that we have built. And Singapore and even ASEAN has done very well because we have been keeping ourselves up to date, working together. But as the threat evolves, we need to be kept updated, ensure that everybody within the ASEAN neighborhood is updated and knows that the evolution of this current threat and how is it moving, because the threat changes by the day.
All right, vigilance is key to Singapore's defense against terrorism.
Yes.
Mr. Singh, thank you very much for coming in to share your insights on this. That was Jasminder Singh from the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies.